Hello, welcome to our last video this year. I apologize in advance, I'm fairly sure this video is going to be quite long, but we are going to talk about the Black Lives Matter movement as it has been in the news recently. So let's have a look. I've sent you a new brochure, which you should have somewhere. Let's just have a look together. So Black Lives Matter, how can citizens make their voices heard? So you can see that you have three images on this front page. You have this big raised fist with "Say Their Names, Black Lives Matter" with loads of different names of victims of police brutality, mostly police brutality. And then you have a boxing glove and a football. So let's see what the link is between all of this. I'm just going to run through the brochure, read it quickly to let you have a look, and then we'll start the lesson itself. So as usual, you have the contents on page 3, vocabulary which goes on 2 pages. There's a flashcode, it works. You are strongly encouraged to have a look, play maybe, do some exercises. Just learn this vocabulary. It's going to be useful for this video and in general, mostly. Of course, you have a page on page 7 for extra vocabulary. Page 8, we have some grammar. We're just going to run through it. And then the introduction on page 9 with 2 pictures. Some writing space on pages 10 and 11. And then you have a double page on page 12 and 13, which is focused on sports activist Colin Kaepernick, who you probably know. Then there is a double page on Muhammad Ali, who you probably have heard of as well. And then finally, there's a recap table on page 16, which will fill in as we see these documents. Some extra writing space on page 17, and then some information on the Black Lives Matter movement, which I've taken from the Black Lives Matter website. We are going to talk about different people and movement in that Black Lives Matter movement. So Trayvon Martin, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and the hashtag defund the police. What is that? So that should be research on your side. We're just going to skim through this. And then finally, we are going to ask a question of political hijacking of this movement. So if you're ready to get started for the lesson, so am I. All right, so Flash Unit, Black Lives Matter. The first pages I want to focus on are, the introduction page. So what do we see? We can see that we have a newspaper clipping or extract with the date, the name of the newspaper, which is the week, and we have its logo. And finally, we have the headline. The headline, les gros titres. So faire les gros titres would be to make the headline, not do, make the headlines. The headline reads, "Taking a stand by bending a knee, how Colin Kaepernick started the movement." And on the right-hand side, I'm just going to move my head a little bit so you can see better. So on the right-hand side, we have an American football player who's in complete sports outfit. So he's got shoulder pads and a jersey and a pair of leggings and a pair of socks and some trainers, or more specifically cleats. So technically cleats is des crampons, like in French. So it's a little metal pieces that you put on the sole of the shoe. But by extension, if you say, I have a pair of cleats, everybody understands it's a pair of trainers with cleats on the sole. All right, so I do have 3 questions. Who is this person? Why was he in the news? And how can we interpret his attitude? So if you know who that person is, that's fantastic. If not, we're moving to page 10 and we're going to write in the let's recap number 1. So the picture of photograph shows an American football player in full sports outfit bending a knee. Bending a knee means you put one knee on the floor or on the ground, while kneeling is technically not what he's doing, because with kneeling you have both knees on the ground. But I just wanted to give you that vocabulary. It seems that this action caused a lot of talk and was in the news a lot. Indeed, a newspaper clipping from the 24th of August 2017 sports the headline, "Taking a stand by bending a knee, how Colin Kaepernick started a movement." So obviously we can guess that the football player in the photograph is Colin Kaepernick. Apparently, his actions sparked enough controversy to make the headlines. He protested against police brutality towards African Americans in the USA by refusing to stand for the national anthem, l'hymne national. This is a non-violent, so a peaceful, pacific form of protest. You remember, protest is manifester, protester, manifester. So, moving right on, we are going to watch a video entitled "Colin Kaepernick Takes a Knee for National Anthem" from ABC News, dated 2016. So that's very close to the date of the newspaper, and it's, you know, the exact date of the action. So what we're going to do is we're going to listen 3 times, as usual, and then write a very, very quick recap in French. Obviously, this recap is not as long as I would expect you to do for a baccalaureate paper, but it's, you know, it's a very quick thing to do. So let's listen.
Out of that protest by Colin Kaepernick, 49ers quarterback knelt instead of standing during the national anthem at last night's game. He was not alone. ABC's Kana Whitworth was there and joins us now from San Diego. Good morning, Kana.
Yeah, George, good morning. One of Colin Kaepernick's teammates joined him in taking a knee, and a Seattle Seahawks player also didn't stand for their national anthem. But this morning, Kaepernick says he's willing to make real change and plans on donating $1 million to charities that he's been working with to help end racial inequality.
For the land of the free.
Overnight, San Francisco 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick refusing to stand during the national anthem again. This time, he took a knee right behind hundreds of service members being honored on Military Appreciation Night. As the crowd and players stand, you can see Kaepernick kneeling on the sideline. Teammate Eric Reed joining him.
Going to stand.
And he's receiving heavy boos here.
The crowd booing every time he took a snap.
He's entitled to his opinion. We fought for that. I just think he's a jerk.
All right, let's listen again.
Out of that protest by Colin Kaepernick, 49ers quarterback knelt instead of standing during the national anthem at last night's game. He was not alone. ABC's Kana Whitworth was there and joins us now from San Diego. Good morning, Kana.
Yeah, George, good morning. One of Colin Kaepernick's teammates joined him in taking a knee, and a Seattle Seahawks player also didn't stand for their national anthem. But this morning, Kaepernick says he's willing to make real change and plans on donating $1 million to charities that he's been working with to help end racial inequality.
For the land of the free.
Overnight, San Francisco 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick refusing to stand during the national anthem again. This time, he took a knee right behind hundreds of service members being honored on Military Appreciation Night. As the crowd and players stand, you can see Kaepernick kneeling on the sideline. Teammate Eric Reed joining him.
Going to stand.
And he's receiving heavy boos here.
The crowd booing every time he took a snap.
He's entitled to his opinion. We fought for that. I just think he's a jerk.
And one last time, I'm just going to check you have sound. Apparently you do. All right, last time.
Out of that protest by Colin Kaepernick, 49ers quarterback knelt instead of standing during the national anthem at last night's game. He was not alone. ABC's Kana Whitworth was there and joins us now from San Diego. Good morning, Kana.
Yeah, George, good morning. One of Colin Kaepernick's teammates joined him in taking a knee, and a Seattle Seahawks player also didn't stand for their national anthem. But this morning, Kaepernick says he's willing to make real change and plans on donating $1 million to charities that he's been working with to help end racial inequality.
For the land and of the free.
Overnight, San Francisco 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick refusing to stand during the national anthem again. This time, he took a knee right behind hundreds of service members being honored on Military Appreciation Night. As the crowd and players stand, you can see Kaepernick kneeling on the sideline. Teammate Eric Reed joining him.
Going to stand.
And he's receiving heavy boos here.
The crowd booing every time he took a snap.
He's entitled to his opinion. We fought for that. I just think he's a jerk.
Okay, so if we recap in French very quickly. So Colin Kaepernick takes a knee for national anthem. Il s'agit d'un extrait de flash d'information de la chaîne américaine ABC News daté du 2 septembre 2016. Je ne sais plus si vous avez le 2 septembre, mais daté de 2016. Le présentateur annonce le titre de son information. 49ers quarterback anthem protest, Kaepernick sits out Star-Spangled Banner again. Vous n'êtes évidemment pas obligé de remettre le titre en anglais dans votre présentation en français. Donc il annonce le titre de son information avant de laisser la parole à sa reporter Kayna Whitworth sur le terrain où s'est disputé le match à San Diego. Celle-ci détaille le comportement de Colin Kaepernick, donc mettre un genou à terre pendant l'hymne national, etc., et de certains de ses coéquipiers lors du match qui vient de se jouer en le resituant dans son contexte. Alors il faut savoir qu'il y a un de ses coéquipiers qui s'appelle Eric Reed qui a mis un genou à terre avec lui et également quelqu'un de l'équipe adverse. Les réactions outrées du public sont également montrées, puisqu'on voit qu'il se fait huer en fait par le public à chaque fois qu'il touche la balle, plus ou moins, et laisse anticiper l'opprobre dont le joueur a fait l'objet et les sanctions qu'il a subies. C'est ce dont on va parler bientôt. Sorry, just leaving this on a little bit longer. Okay, so if I do like a second recap, which you can write on page 11, I guess. During their national anthem, usually, people are usually expected to stand and even in the United States, put their right hand over their heart. Kaepernick refused to do so and knelt or took a knee instead. His attitude it's rather strange because kneeling is often considered as a gesture of respect or submission, rather than one of protest. Usually in most Western countries, and when a man puts one knee on the ground, he is either like mocking knights, being knighted by the king, or he is proposing marriage, which is not what he's doing. So it's a little bit strange because it's a gesture of respect and submission maybe, but not usually of protest. So perhaps he wishes his gesture to be considered as one of humility, and in that way attract the attention and sympathy of a great number of Americans. This does not seem to work. In the TV report, some supporters, some football fans, appear to disagree with his attitude. One man even calls Kaepernick a jerk. Now, I just want to talk very quickly about that man in particular, because in France we have this opinion of American people, especially this type of person, as a little bit backwards and maybe not too bright. But he does say something extremely interesting, which is that he supports Kaepernick's right to expression, freedom of expression, even if he disagrees. So that's something to keep in mind. Not everybody is set in their ways and refuses to change their mind. They can disagree and say, well, I understand that you can express yourself. I just think your point of view is stupid. So, question, what impact do you think Kaepernick's gesture had? If you have followed the news even a little bit in the last couple of weeks, you'll have realized that this attitude of putting one knee on the ground is not innocent at all. And it's actually been kind of hijacked, not hijacked, but it's been repeated by a lot of people, especially politicians, in the last week. So that's an interesting point. Regarding the impact the gesture had before this year, so between 2016 and let's say early 2020, it started a conversation, but for Kaepernick, this was a breaking point for his career. So this was meant to be group work. It's not going to be, obviously. But if we move to page 12 and page 13, you see that we have a double page on Colin Kaepernick. So we'll have first this Amnesty International logo, which we're going to talk about in a second. And then we're going to watch a video which will help us fill in this table on page 12. So the Amnesty International logo, let's say. So we have the name Amnesty International, we have the candle with the barbed wire, the barbed wire. And I don't know if you've ever come across Amnesty International, but it is an NGO, non-governmental organization, une ONG. It's a non-governmental organization which focuses on human rights. It fights to protect human rights through, different methods, petitions, demonstrations, protests, strikes, whatever they can do, anywhere in the world that you have human rights violations. Amnesty International is going to point that out, say, that's a human rights violation, you can't do this, please stop. We're going to inform different governments, etc. It is independent of state governments, but it works, of course, on the geopolitical scene, international geopolitical scene. So Amnesty International is an NGO that focuses on human rights. Let's have a look at this video, let's say a couple times, and then let's fill in this table on page 12.
A standing ovation for the player who took a stand. When the national anthem was played before games began in 2016, Colin Kaepernick started kneeling in protest when he was quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers.
How can you stand for the national anthem of a nation that preaches and propagates freedom and justice for all, that is so unjust to so many of the people living there? How can you not be in a rage when you know that you are always at risk of death in the streets or enslavement in the prison system? How can you willingly be blind to the truth of systemic racialized injustice?
A former teammate was with Kaepernick as he received Amnesty International's Ambassador of Conscience Award.
It's ironic that the stand Colin and I took wasn't to stand at all, but it was to take a knee. Colin didn't kneel in protest of a song or a symbolic piece of fabric, but he knelt to bring awareness to the human rights still being denied to people of color. He didn't kneel because he is anti-America, but he believes that America should be held to the standard that it has written on paper, that we are all created equal.
Kaepernick's form of protest wasn't popular with everyone. It was viewed as unpatriotic by US President Donald Trump. He urged team owners to fire players who copied Kaepernick. He's following in famous footsteps with this award. Previous recipients include anti-apartheid campaigner and former South African president, the late Nelson Mandela.
But just like the Ambassador of Conscience award winners before him, Kaepernick chose to speak out, despite the risks and expectation for him not to do that. His commitment to the movement is all the more remarkable because of the professional cost to him and the alarming levels of vitriol that it has attracted from those in power.
30-year-old Kaepernick remains out of a job. He hasn't played in the NFL since opting out of his contract with the 49ers a year ago. But he continues to be a role model for some youngsters, inspiring a new generation, such as these schoolchildren in Amsterdam, to keep taking a stand. Kevin Calvert, Al Jazeera. A standing ovation for the player who took a stand. When the national anthem was played before games began in 2016, Colin Kaepernick started kneeling in protest when he was quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers.
How can you stand for the national anthem of a nation that preaches and propagates freedom and justice for all, that is so unjust to so many of the people living there? How can you not be in a rage when you know that you are always at risk of death in the streets or enslavement in the prison system? How can you willingly be blind to the truth of systemic racialized injustice?
A former teammate was with Kaepernick as he received Amnesty International's Ambassador of Conscience Award.
It's ironic that the stand Colin and I took wasn't to stand at all, but it was to take a knee. Colin didn't kneel in protest of a song or a symbolic piece of fabric, but he knelt to bring awareness to the human rights still being denied to people of color. He didn't kneel because he is anti-America, but he believes that America should be held to the standard that it has written on paper, that we are all created equal.
Kaepernick's form of protest wasn't popular with everyone. It was viewed as unpatriotic by US President Donald Trump. He urged team owners to fire players who copied Kaepernick. He's following in famous footsteps with this award. Previous recipients include anti-apartheid campaigner and former South African president, the late Nelson Mandela.
But just like the Ambassador of Conscience award winners before him, Kaepernick chose to speak out, despite the risks and expectation for him not to do that. His commitment to the movement is all the more remarkable because of the professional cost to him and the alarming levels of vitriol that it has attracted from those in power.
30-year-old Kaepernick remains out of a job. He hasn't played in the NFL since opting out of his contract with the 49ers a year ago. But he continues to be a role model for some youngsters, inspiring a new generation, such as these schoolchildren in Amsterdam, to keep taking a stand. Kevin Calvert, Al Jazeera.
Never mind me, I'm just drinking a little bit of water. So, if we fill in this table, what is the reaction of the audience? It's quite positive, isn't it? So the audience cheers and claps. They agree with the speaker, or speakers in the plural. Cheers is acclamer, and clap is doing this. You can say applaud, but when you say applaud, you kind of mean it metaphorically. So if I say, I don't know, the teacher applauded the students' actions, it's not necessarily physically clap. It's more saying, oh, that was a very good action, so promoting something. Reasons. Colin Kaepernick took a knee because Black Americans are at risk of being killed or of being enslaved in prison, which is insane. Slavery has been abolished in the United States, except as punishment for a crime. So it is legal in the United States to force prisoners to work for no pay. Fantastic system. What is Eric Reid's role? Eric Reid, if you remember, he was the teammate in Kaepernick's team who took a knee alongside him. So he supports Kaepernick's actions and he explains his motivations. They are not unpatriotic. On the contrary, he wants to make the US a better and fairer place. There's a space between fairer and place, I'm sorry. What about Donald Trump? You've seen him on the screen. Well, the US president is against Kaepernick. He regards him as disrespectful and unpatriotic. What about Nelson Mandela? What's Nelson Mandela doing here? Nelson Mandela, he was the president of South Africa who was elected in 1994, and he put an end to apartheid, which was a discriminatory policy against Black people. And he is one of the people who received the Amnesty International Award for Ambassador of Conscience. What were the consequences for Kaepernick for taking a knee before a football game? He stopped playing for the NFL. I don't know if we've said this, the NFL is the National Football League. It is the, like, I don't know, it's the biggest league for American football. Who are the children in Amsterdam? The school children yell, "I know my rights," and they are inspired by Kaepernick to keep fighting for equal rights. I don't know if you noticed in the video, but at some point at the end, the school children, they're doing like a spray paint stencil, like a graffiti, and it has the Amnesty International logo with a candle and a barbed wire. So they probably have a program with Amnesty International to talk about human rights. All right, so we've done the table, and now there's just a little extra video I'd like to watch with you, which we're gonna study through. First of all, a picture. You can write whatever you like about this video on the little lines on page 12. So this picture, as you can see, it's in black and white. It's Colin Kaepernick's face. It's very, very zoomed in. There's text in white letters that says, "Believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything." And then at the bottom of the picture, you have the Nike logo and the Nike slogan, which is "Just do it," which you probably know. It's very famous. He's not really smiling in this picture, and he looks, his eyebrows are a little bit furrowed, and his eyes look very big. I don't know, it looks like he's very serious, very solemn, and maybe a bit emotional, not sure. So, as you can guess, this picture is not just any picture, it is part of a campaign, a marketing campaign for Nike, the famous brand. And of course, we're going to watch the video aspect of this campaign. So the advertisement. Let's watch.
If people say your dreams are crazy, if they laugh at what you think you can do, good. Stay that way. Because what non-believers fail to understand is that calling a dream crazy is not an insult. It's a compliment. Don't try to be the fastest runner in your school or the fastest in the world. Be the fastest ever. Don't picture yourself wearing OBJ's jersey. Picture OBJ wearing yours. Don't settle for homecoming queen or linebacker. Do both. Lose 120 pounds and become an Ironman after beating a brain tumor. Don't believe you have to be like anybody to be somebody. If you're born a refugee, don't let it stop you from playing soccer for the national team at age 16. Don't become the best basketball player on the planet. Be bigger than basketball. Believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything. When they talk about the greatest team in the history of the sport, make sure it's your team. If you have only one hand, don't just watch football, play it at the highest level. And if you're a girl from Compton, don't just become a tennis player. Become the greatest athlete ever. Yeah, that's more like it. So don't ask if your dreams are crazy. Ask if they're crazy enough.
Okay, so very sweet video. You have this repetitive music that is, I don't know, it's a little bit emotional. I'm not sure. It's quite inspirational, at least. I'm sure you've recognized some athletes. I'm pretty bad at knowing who's who, but there was LeBron James, there was Serena Williams, the football player Davis, Megan Rapinoe. There's loads of people in this ad. Colin Kaepernick, of course. And I'd like to talk about just what it is about and the link with Kaepernick and his fight. So the Nike campaign, the Nike ad campaign, has a very positive message. It encourages people to keep trying, keep practicing, keep training until they attain their goals. The campaign pushes people to dream big, that is, to have crazy dreams, to have a lot of ambition. They want people to believe that they can do whatever they set their mind to. This is quite in keeping with Nike's slogan, which is just do it. Colin Kaepernick appears in the video with the words, believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything. The football player jeopardized his career in sports to raise awareness of police brutality and of inequality between Black and white people in the United States of America. So when he says, believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything, he's talking about believe in what is right, believe in human rights, equality, even if for him it meant sacrificing a huge sports career, a very lucrative sports career as well. By the way, the word jeopardized in the last paragraph, that means mettre en danger. There's just a little grammar point I want to see with you. It's not even in the brochure, but it's just a reminder. Continuer à plus un verbe se traduit par la structure keep plus le verbe en ing en anglais. Et pas keep plus to plus le verbe. Non, keep plus le verbe ing. Donc, continuer à faire quelque chose se traduit par keep doing something. That's it. That's the grammar point. All right, so if we move to page 13, we have a trio of documents. We have a beautiful tweet from our favorite person on Twitter. We have a photograph, and we have a short text. Let's have a look at the tweet. So Donald J. Trump, at Real Donald Trump, be happy, be cool. A football game that fans are paying so much money to watch and enjoy is no place to protest. Most of that money goes to the players anyway. Find another way to protest. Stand proudly for your national anthem or be suspended without pay. Not great. So what can we take away from this tweet? First of all, he is obsessed with money. There's recurrent references to money, and also this allusion to national pride. And, you know, that's a bit of a touchy subject. So first of all, the references to money. Second line, fans are paying so much money to watch. Most of that money goes to players anyway. And finally, the punishment he suggests is to be suspended without pay. And the allusion to national pride would be to stand proudly for your national anthem. Again, because that's what American people are expected to do out of respect for the anthem. If we have a look at the photograph, we can see that we have two Black men in red jerseys. If you look at the jersey, it's the same. So it's red, it's got number 7. And if you look at one of the placards, it's actually Kaepernick's jersey. It's Kaepernick's number. So two Black men in red jerseys holding placards or posters. Posters are a little bit softer and placards are a bit more rigid. So that's placards with slogans like Black Lives Matter on the left and I Stand with Colin on the right-hand side. On the first placard on the left-hand side, there is a collage of various photographs maybe activists, and or victims of racial violence. On the second placard, there is a picture of Kaepernick raising his fist on a football field. Now, when we talked about Kaepernick, we said that bending the knee was not a traditional protest gesture, but raising a fist is. That's a very traditional gesture of protest or victory. Anyway, what the men are doing with their jerseys and their placards, this is a peaceful way to protest and make a stand against institutionalized racism. And finally, if we have a look at the text itself, let's just read it. You cannot glorify Muhammad Ali and vilify Colin Kaepernick. We celebrate Muhammad Ali not just for his talent, but for taking two seismic events, civil rights and Vietnam, and giving people the courage to find their voice about both. He was hated for it, and it cost him the best years of his career. We celebrate John Carlos and Tommy Smith for raising their fists in Mexico City in 1968 as a protest against racial inequality, even though they were pilloried at the time. We celebrate the greatest of our heroes, Jackie Robinson, even though he was despised by so many Americans to the extent that he would never salute the flag because he was a black man in a white world. Many other athletes, now sanctified for their courage, were told to zip it and play at one time or another, such as Jim Brown, Billie Jean King, and Bill Russell. So it is hard to reconcile the cultural amnesia and the hostility being hurled at Colin Kaepernick. The 49ers quarterback refused to stand during the anthem Friday, and whether you think he managed to revive a discussion about police conduct and racial injustice, his right to protest must still be applauded. He did not use a bullhorn. He only spoke up after the media caught on. This is bigger than football, and it would be selfish on my part to look the other way, he explained. There are bodies on the street, in the street. Some will never understand that message, and fewer will approve of the actual boycott. But it was a seminal act of courage. Kaepernick took a stand, probably jeopardizing his career, and absorbed an avalanche of hate. A viral video even shows a fan burning the player's jersey as it hung from a tree while he sings the anthem. An interesting expression of American values, that. No one can deny that sports is a prism that shapes how we see ourselves as a country. So you cannot canonize Ali and vilify Kaepernick, whose impact cannot be felt or measured in real time. But the day will come when we wonder why more people didn't have his courage. So that's from the New Jersey Opinion on August 30th, 2016. This article gives a very, very positive light, shines a very positive light on the events that transpired. And what I want you to take away from this is first in the title, which is You Cannot Glorify Muhammad Ali and Vilify Colin Kaepernick. There's the meaning of and the contrast between glorify and vilify. There's a repetition in the first 3 paragraphs of We Celebrate. You remember that's an anaphora. And there's a series or enumeration of glorified sports stars from minorities, including Billie Jean King, who was the first openly lesbian tennis champion. So it's not just about the fight for equal rights between whites and blacks. It is equal rights for everyone across the board. This article praises Colin Kaepernick's courage and sacrifice of his career. And they say in 2016, they say he's hated now, but no doubt he will be glorified in the future. And now that I'm filming this video in 2020, that's the case. And finally, the key sentence, which is a quote from Colin Kaepernick, is that this is bigger than football. There are bodies in the street. So what can we take away from this page? Well, sorry, I don't know what that was. What can we take away from this page? We have a sports player, pretty famous, a rising star in American football, who basically sacrificed his career to make sure that people would listen and people would start talking about racism in the United States and in general in other countries and do something about it. And that was in 2016. And people still remember that. Now, if we use these 3 documents and even the documents before, let's just quickly fill in our table on page 16. So who's Colin Kaepernick? When did it happen? So Colin Kaepernick, an American football player who plays for the NFL, the National Football League, and the date we have is August 30th, 2016. We do know that, of course, the action is not from that date, it's a few days before. What's the context? Football game in the USA, the national anthem is playing before the game, while military and police personnel is being honored on the field. What did he do? He took a knee instead of standing during the national anthem before the football game. Why? He wanted to peacefully protest police brutality and highlight the fact that the values of the United States of America were not in reality lived by. As you know, the values, well, some of the values are equality, freedom, right to liberty, right to, you're free to pursue happiness, all of that, freedom of expression. So equality is one of the core values of the United States, and let's just say it's still a theoretical thing. Negative consequences. He attracted a lot of criticism or even outrage. For example, fans would burn their jerseys with his number. And he lost his job. I should have written that, but he lost his job. I mean, his career came to a stop. It came to, it grinded to a halt in 2016. And he at the time I'm speaking, he's still not played for the NFL since then. Positive consequences, he caught the attention of the media and ensured that the problems he wanted to denounce were discussed and brought to light. So he made sure, he basically traded, he sacrificed his career, but he made sure the media talked about the problem and the potential solutions. All right. If we write a little recap on Kaepernick, what could we write? Colin Kaepernick's action in taking a knee during the national anthem is not the first example of peaceful protest made by a professional athlete against inequality and discrimination. It's not the first time, far from it. Others have done so before him, but it took time for the general public to recognize the courage and value of their actions. At the time of their protests, they were often vilified and treated badly by the media and the public. It is only in hindsight, in retrospective, that their actions appear great. It may be the same with Kaepernick. Although he was crucified for being unpatriotic and disrespectful, he may very well be hailed as a hero and a true patriot, upholding the core values, the core American values of equality and freedom in the future. And to be honest, this has started. So we're done with Colin Kaepernick and we're moving on to page 14 and 15 with Muhammad Ali. First of all, let's have a look at the couple of photographs we have at the bottom of page 14. So in this one, you can see it's a boxing match. You notice there's a lot of people in the background, so that's it's probably quite a big deal. I'm just going to move my head again because I'm in the way. There. So they're fighting, well, really the boxing. One man is trying to punch the other one. The other one, so the one on the right-hand side, he is stepping aside. He's dodging the blow. To dodge a blow, c'est échapper au coup de poing, feinter, je ne sais plus comment on dit. In this one, the match is finished, or at least the round is finished. One man is on the ground, one man is standing. He has probably won. He has succeeded in defeating his opponent. He is victorious. And he probably feels very triumphant. I mean, look at his face. He's like, yes, I've won. And apparently it was not an easy victory either. And the man on the ground, he's lost and he's been defeated. So, just by the way, in both photographs, so Muhammad Ali in the first photograph was the man on the right, the one who was dodging the blow. And in the second photograph, he was the one standing. So we have a video. I don't have a link for you, but we're going to watch it together. We're going to watch it a couple times and then fill in the table, just as we did for Colin Kaepernick.
When 12-year-old Cassius Clay had his bike stolen in Louisville, Kentucky, he took up the sweet science so he could whoop whoever stole it. Soon, Clay became an outstanding amateur fighter and picked up a gold medal at the Olympic Games in Rome in 1960. He returned home to Louisville, wearing his gold medal proudly around his neck. But the pride faded when he was refused service in a whites-only restaurant. The incident caused him to throw his medal into the Ohio River. On February 25, 1964, the 22-year-old fighter took on heavily favored champ Sonny Liston. Clay predicted victory over the Big Ugly Bear to anyone who would listen. He beat Liston in the 8th round to become the heavyweight champion. After the fight, Clay jumped around the ring proclaiming he shook up the world. Shortly after the fight, he announced his membership in the Nation of Islam. A week later, the Nation of Islam leader Elijah Muhammad gave Clay the new name, Muhammad Ali. The champ embraced the name change. Many people in press, including the New York Times, refused to refer to him by his new name.
One more time.
When 12-year-old Cassius Clay had his bike stolen in Louisville, Kentucky, he took up the sweet science so he could whoop whoever stole it. Soon, Clay became an outstanding amateur fighter and picked up a gold medal at the Olympic Games in Rome in 1960. He returned home to Louisville, wearing his gold medal proudly around his neck. But the pride faded when he was refused service in a whites-only restaurant. The incident caused him to throw his medal into the Ohio River. On February 25, 1964, the 22-year-old fighter took on heavily favored champ Sonny Liston. Clay predicted victory over the Big Ugly Bear to anyone who would listen. He beat Liston in the 8th round to become the heavyweight champion. After the fight, Clay jumped around the ring proclaiming he shook up the world. Shortly after the fight, he announced his membership in the Nation of Islam. A week later, the Nation of Islam leader Elijah Muhammad gave Clay the new name, Muhammad Ali. The champ embraced the name change. Many people in press, including the New York Times, refused to refer to him by his new name.
All right. So, if we fill in this table, what is the importance of a bike?
When 12-year-old Cassius Clay had his bike stolen in Louisville, Kentucky, he took up the sweet science so he could whoop whoever stole it.
Okay, so his bike was stolen when he was 12, and he learned to fight to punish the thief. The word they use in the video is to whoop the thief, which means to le corriger. So what happened in Rome?
Soon, Clay became an outstanding amateur fighter and picked up a gold medal at the Olympic Games in Rome in 1960.
Okay, so he received a gold medal in the Olympic Games in Rome in 1960. His feelings on his return to Louisville, well, you can guess. I mean, he received a gold medal.
He returned home to Louisville, wearing his gold medal proudly around his neck. But
okay, so pride. He felt very proud of his medal, but that didn't last long. So incident in a restaurant.
pride faded when he was refused service in a whites-only restaurant.
Okay, so he was refused service in a whites-only restaurant. It seems like a weird concept now. At the time, segregation was in place, so black people and white people were separated. Some restaurants were especially for white people, so black people would be refused, which, I don't know, crazy. Consequences of that incident.
The incident caused him to throw his medal into the Ohio River.
Okay, so he got very angry and he threw his medal in the Ohio River, which, you know, it's quite a logical reaction. I mean, you get a gold medal, you're super proud, you go home, you want to go to the restaurant, and they say to you, no, actually, yeah, sure, you've got a gold medal, but you're black. Which, I don't know, I would get really angry too. So he got angry, threw his medal in the Ohio River, and now I want to know who the big ugly bear is.
On February 25, 1964, the 22-year-old fighter took on heavily favored champ Sonny Liston. Clay predicted victory over the big ugly bear to anyone who would listen.
Okay, so February 25th, 1964, that's the victory against the standing heavyweight champion Sonny Liston. Let me move my face. There we go. And the big ugly bear was Sonny Liston's nickname. What about the change of name? So Muhammad Ali, that's not his original name. Let's see.
Shortly after the fight, he announced his membership in the Nation of Islam. A week later, the Nation of Islam leader Elijah Muhammad gave Clay the new name, Muhammad Ali. The champ embraced the name change. Many people in press, including the New York Times, refused to refer to him by his new name.
Right, so he changed his name after his victory to Muhammad Ali. So his original name was Cassius Clay, and his new name became Muhammad Ali. This name was given to him by the leader of the religious and political group, the Nation of Islam, whose name was Elijah Muhammad. All right, so we've seen the video, we've seen the pictures. Now let's have a look at the text and the accompanying documents. So a little bit of background information. I'm sure you know this, but the Vietnam War. So the United States joined forces with the Republic of South Vietnam to contest communist forces comprised of South Vietnamese guerrilla fighters, Viet Cong, and the North Vietnamese Army. The USA drafted more than 2 million young Americans and directed the war from 1965 to 1968. It ended with communist victory in April 1975, and it became known as the only war America ever lost. It was highly traumatic for America, for the United States. Crazily traumatic, mostly because that war was televised. It was there were reporters, and they would actually film it and put the pictures on television. Which, of course, if you see your son or your cousin or someone you know getting hurt, that's horrible. Yeah, so the Vietnam War, the USA drafted 2 million, more than 2 million young Americans. To draft in French is conscrire. It means you kind of force people to become soldiers. It's not just volunteers. So, second document, it's a newspaper clipping from the Houston Post. Clay gets 5 years, $10,000 fine. With we see some things. Fans write Cassius off. So, Clay gets 5 years, $10,000 fine. A fine is une amende. It's money you pay when you've committed a misdemeanor or a crime. We have a text. Let's read it. recalling Muhammad Ali's Vietnam War resistance in the age of Trump. Oh, by the way, Donald Trump was of age when the Vietnam War was fought. He never fought. He managed to evade the draft. Just saying. So when Cassius Clay changed his name to Muhammad Ali, and when he later refused the call of the military during the war in Vietnam, he was not universally cheered. Hardly. Ali was not prepared to give his life or kill Vietnamese on behalf of a society that barely valued his life or that of his fellow black men and women. Or, as he put it, why should they ask me to put on a uniform and go 10,000 miles from home and drop bombs and bullets on brown people in Vietnam, while so-called Negro people in Louisville are treated like dogs? If I thought the war was going to bring freedom and equality to 22 million of my people, they wouldn't have to draft me. I'd join tomorrow. I have nothing to lose by standing up for my beliefs. We've been in jail for 400 years. That's quite a strong statement. On April 28, 1967, at the United States Armed Forces examining an entrance station in Houston, Ali, standing beside 25 other nerve-wracked young men called to the draft, refused to respond to the call of Cassius Clay. He said no and was sentenced to 5 years in prison and released on bail. Boxing authorities quickly stripped him of his championship title and suspended his license to box in New York State. He was 25 years old, deprived of his livelihood. So this is an article by David Remnick for the New Yorker, September 24th, 2017. So you see this big time difference between the article and the facts. But what can we say using these documents about Muhammad Ali? Let's write on page 16 in our little table. So who, when? Muhammad Ali, formerly known as Cassius Clay, refused to join the army on April 28th, 1967. Context. The US Army was fighting in Vietnam. They were allied with the South, but they were losing the war. 2 million American soldiers fought in Vietnam. That's not true. 2 million American soldiers were forced to fight in Vietnam. What did he do? He refused to join, even though he was drafted, and refused to respond to his former name. Why? He felt that it was unfair to ask a black man who was being treated badly in the US and was a victim of racial inequality to go fight and kill members of another minority in another country and maybe die for a country that didn't respect its own principles. Negative consequences: he lost his career, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison, he received a hefty fine, that means an expensive fine, $10,000. At the time, not now, at the time, that's a lot of money. And he lost his boxing career. He was stripped of his title and of his license. When I say he was sentenced to 5 years in prison, we saw in the text it was 5 years in prison, but he was released on bail, sous caution. But there were some positive consequences. He became an emblematic figure of the equal rights movement, and he was an inspiration to many Black Americans. He took a stand for what he believed in, even though, like for Colin Kaepernick, even though it put his career in jeopardy. And finally, let's write a little recap on Muhammad Ali. So Cassius Clay, let's move my face because I'm in the way again. Cassius Clay began his rise to fame as a boxer. He won an Olympic gold medal and later became the heavyweight champion. He then changed his name to Muhammad Ali, which the press didn't like, but his fame, some might say notoriety, grew even more when he refused to be drafted into the United States Army for the Vietnam War. He refused to fight and kill for a nation which treated him and people who looked like him unfairly. Just one thing, notoriety. So notoriety in French is a little bit like notoriété, except notoriété in French is positive. It means fame, la célébrité, la notoriété, voilà. Notoriety in English is not positive. It means that you are famous, but for bad things. Like a serial killer will be notorious, not famous, notorious, because that's negative. I hope that makes sense. Indeed, Black people were heavily discriminated against. For instance, restaurants could refuse service to people of color. Buses were segregated, as were schools. Some still are. Equality was technically a founding principle of the United States, but it clearly wasn't applied. Muhammad Ali explained that he could not join the army of such a hypocritical country, especially to kill people from another minority. He was severely punished for standing up to the army. He was sentenced to 5 years in jail, although he was released on bail, and had to pay a fine of $10,000. Again, that's a lot of money at the time, even now. He also lost his championship title and had to abandon his career as he was no longer allowed to box. He put his career and livelihood in jeopardy for what he believed in. He paid a very hefty price for his actions, but he also became an inspiration to millions. When I say he put his career and livelihood in jeopardy, you remember, means in danger. Sweet. So, a little bit of grammar to express contrast. We can use a few expressions. They translate a little bit differently in French, but let's have a look. So we can use even though. Even though would be translated as même si, bien que. We celebrate the greatest of our heroes, even though he was despised by so many Americans. Nous célébrons le plus grand de nos héros, bien que ou même si il était méprisé par tant d'Américains. We can also use despite or in spite of. Oh, by the way, even though, although, though, they're all synonyms or equivalents. So despite or in spite of. Despite being one of the NFL's best players, Kaepernick has been out of work since March 2017. Despite would be malgré, en dépit de. En dépit du fait, malgré le fait qu'il était un des meilleurs joueurs de la NFL, Kaepernick n'a pas eu de travail depuis mars 2017. Amnesty International honored Kaepernick for his gesture, whereas Donald Trump viewed it as unpatriotic. Whereas would be translated in French as tandis que, alors que. Amnesty International a rendu honneur à Kaepernick pour son geste, alors que Donald Trump l'a considéré comme anti-patriote, non patriote. An equivalent of whereas is while. Why should they ask me to put on a uniform while so-called Negro people in Louisville are treated like dogs? Again, it's the same as whereas, pendant que, tandis que, alors que. Finally, we have however. I know that you know however. Kaepernick has been featured in several campaigns for Nike. However, he's not currently signed with the NFL. However would be cependant, and you always have a comma after it. That's it for contrast. Pretty quick. We just have should. Donc simplement, on les a revus un petit peu, hein, les modos, mais on a recours à l'auxiliaire de modalité should pour exprimer un jugement, pour adresser un conseil ou pour formuler un reproche. Essentiellement, le jugement, c'est tu devrais faire ça ou tu devrais pas faire ça, sous-entendu parce que c'est bien ou c'est pas bien. Adresser un conseil, c'est souvent you should do something, tu devrais faire quelque chose. Formuler un reproche, c'est plutôt tu aurais dû faire ça. C'est plutôt l'idée d'avoir la rétrospective derrière soi. Ce jugement peut porter sur un événement passé, présent ou à venir. On utilise la même forme, should ou shouldn't, à toutes les personnes. Il n'y a pas de S ou de ED, c'est toujours should ou shouldn't. Et should est obligatoirement suivi d'une base verbale. C'est-à-dire que comme en français, tu devrais faire, faire est le verbe à l'infinitif. En anglais, ce sera pareil. You should do. On ne conjugue pas. C'est tout. Donc, should the sports arena be a place for protest? L'arène sportive, en tout cas le terrain sportif, devrait-il être un endroit pour protester et pour manifester? If there is one thing that should be politics free, it's sports. S'il y a une chose qui devrait être libérée de la politique, c'est le sport. Donc là, c'est un jugement. Sport is a neutral ground and shouldn't be politicized. Le sport, c'est un terrain neutre et ça ne devrait pas être politique. Ça ne devrait pas être policisé. Non, c'est moche. Ça ne devrait pas être rendu politique. Okay. So, if we move on to Black Lives Matter, because that's what I want to talk about in this unit, really. So, Black Lives Matter, I do suggest you have a look at the Black Lives Matter website, which is blacklivesmatter.com. And I went to the About section to take the text that you have on page 18. What I would love for you to do is to just research Trayvon Martin, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and defund the police. For Trayvon Martin, I'd like to know what Florida's Stand Your Ground law is and why it's important in his case. I want to talk about the social media attention around this case and the presidential campaign of 2012, not 2016, 2012. For Breonna Taylor, I want the facts and the response of the police, the response of the public, etc. And I want to talk about May and June 2020 because that was an important time for this case. Her birthday and Louisville, because we've heard about Louisville before today. For defund the police, what does it mean to defund? And if we defund the police, what do we fund instead? And for George Floyd, just like for Breonna Taylor, I want the facts. And the response, I want the legal consequences because there have been legal consequences for the people involved. And I want you to tell me about social media attention and the mainstream media attention. Because for Trayvon Martin, for instance, social media attention was much bigger than mainstream media attention. For George Floyd, that's not the case. Let's watch a video.
Until Black people are free,
no one is fully free.
Because the issues that affect Black people the most affect everyone.
Everyone. Can you imagine an America with no police brutality, without mass shooting and gun violence, mass incarceration,
children in cages,
racist immigration policies,
voter suppression, environmental degradation, racial injustice?
It's time to vote for an America where our lives are valued and protected, where police are held accountable, where we have access to quality health care, where we can thrive in school, where our water is safe to drink. It's time to vote for an America without low wages and low opportunity. Vote for an America without the oppression of white supremacy.
Can you imagine an America where oppression and fear are dissolved?
When we are whole and healed, we are the most powerful voters in this country. So we will not be distracted by the noise they make. We are going to choose who leads us, those who truly represent us, and vote out those who don't. Vote you out. We are going to show up and fight for what we need and vote for what really matters. We are what matters 2020. Text what matters to 24365.
So that's a bit of an odd video for us because this is a video that's asking people to vote, but they don't say for whom. So as you know, there was a presidential election in 2012, 2016, and the next one will be 2020. So that's this year in November in the United States. The problem is that there is a racist in the White House. The alternative, Joe Biden, is not necessarily the best person in the world, but I mean, it's hard to be worse. However, this video is interesting in that, again, it's not saying this party is better than this party. It's saying we should vote for the people who will represent us, who will understand our problems, and who will want to offer solutions. And that's a very interesting point of view. And I think that this is very smart, an attitude from Black Lives Matter and from their website, because if they had decided to say vote for Democrats or vote for Republicans, it would have divided the movement. By saying, please vote, it's important, you have to make your voice heard, please vote for people who will represent you, who will understand your problems, want solutions. They are reminding people that they have the right to vote and that perhaps it's a little bit of an obligation if they want change. I also want to watch another video. This time it's a news report, and it's called George Floyd Tribute. Democrats take a knee for almost 9 minutes. And there's a subtext to the video, which we're going to read together. So Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, led House and Senate Democrats in a moment of silence at the Capitol's Emancipation Hall after reading the names of George Floyd and others killed in police custody. They kneeled for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, the length of time prosecutors say Floyd was pinned under a white police officer's knee before he died. So here we have politicians who you will see are adopting a very famous gesture. Well, famous now.
We gather in honor of those Americans and so many others. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Botham Jean, Terrence Crutcher, Jordan Davis, Oscar Grant, Philando Castile, Freddie Gray, Walter Scott, Tamir Rice, Michael Brown, Eric Garner, Trayvon Martin. Any other names, members?
Amadou Diallo. Sean Bell. Jordan Davis. Freddie Gray.
Love.
Alphon Taylor.
You see how long it was to have that knee in his neck.
So here I have a problem, because as emotional as it makes me feel to hear all these names and to see these people, this is political hijacking. The events in the US are horrible. I think Colin Kaepernick had it right. There's bodies in the street. Literally, people are getting killed over this. And I'm not saying that the United States it is the only country. I mean, France is clearly not perfect, but I don't know. I don't understand it. Anyhow, this is political hijacking. When I say political hijacking, I'm saying that politicians are taking a movement which is actually beautiful and taking it for themselves to make sure that they also get a spotlight on them so that they can have as many votes as possible and become more famous and more liked, because it's a presidential election year. It's an election year and they need votes. And black votes can sway the balance, can really, really shift the balance. So I'm not sure whether to be completely mad at them for this political hijacking, because at the same time, they're using absolute tragedies for their own ends. But on the other hand, they are making the problem more apparent. And by, if we have the Speaker of the House, taking a knee and talking about racism, even though, like me, she's white, she's a white woman, I think it has an impact, even if she's probably doing it to grab the attention of the media. At least the Black Lives Matter movement is being talked about. And so hopefully solutions will start to appear. Changing who's in the White House would probably be a good start, but that's not the only thing they can do. Just like in France, a presidential election is not a make it or break it deal. You can do other things with your vote, with your protest, with your time, with your clicks, to make sure that people hear what needs to be heard and are confronted with reality, even though that's hard. All right. This is where I'll leave you. I know this is a super long video, plus I'm probably now going to cut it. So I hope you enjoyed it. I'm feeling a bit emotional, so I'm going to have a nice glass of water. And yeah, have a fantastic day. Take care. Be kind. And I will see you next time. Bye.